If there's anything you need to land in a horror game, it's tension. I have to say, I think they succeeded. There won't be any spoilers in this video until later, and you'll get a warning, don't worry. Here's a very quick brief on Dead Space. You play as Isaac Clarke, a systems engineer sent to the USG Ishimura on a routine repair op. When you arrive, the station appears deserted, and then you and your team are attacked by necromorphs shortly thereafter, and it's up to Isaac to figure out what happened to the inhabitants on board and find a way out. You'll pretty much constantly be hearing enemies moving around the ship on other floors, levels, and rooms. Most of the time it's just cosmetic, but they establish a precedent early on that they very well might just shuffle into the room that you're in and try to kill you. Here's some advice that you won't hear anyone else give you. Turn off the music. Having the music on tells you when you're going to get ambushed. With it off, you hear stumbling around and you never know if you're safe or not because the music isn't there to tell you how to feel. Now, music can help accentuate precisely how you feel, but I think it's a net negative in this case. I played the entire game with these settings, and I was on edge for the entire runtime. It didn't keep me up at night or anything, I just found myself perpetually paranoid. Piece of shit! Horror games have this kind of intrinsic problem where a lot of the horror is centered around the risk of death, but if you actually die, all of the tension is immediately dissolved because it's a video game. Developers want to balance on this fine line of almost killing you all the time, which isn't very easy when player skill and different difficulties are a huge factor. I personally found that I was way more tense when out of combat because I didn't know when it might start. Anytime I actually saw enemies, it was kind of relieving because the threats became known. The game isn't super difficult even on the highest difficulty, so ironically death wasn't even my main concern. Most of the tension came not from worrying about if I was going to live, but just the raw anxiety that comes from not knowing who, what, or where your enemy is. This wouldn't be remotely as effective if not for the excellent sound design. I think this is pretty obvious, but the game looks absolutely gorgeous. Comparing it to how it used to look in the original, it is miles ahead and is a clear improvement in every way without shafting the original's art direction like some remasters. I think the world of Dead Space is also really cool and used to great effect by the actual mechanics. The reason that you have to scrounge around people's corpses for pocket change during the goddamn apocalypse is because the company you work for is a greedy capitalist nightmare, something the game is not scared to acknowledge. Now, at the time of writing, the frame rate can eat it pretty hard. Specifically, the last chapter of the game for me oscillated between 5 and 40 FPS. It'll probably run better for you because my processor was originally carved on a stone tablet in Roman times. Give it a few weeks and a performance patch and I doubt there will be many issues. A big reason why this remaster was a good idea is because the original has some serious control issues, as well as unfortunately being haunted by the ghost of Gmod's past. I'm happy to report that the first issue is a lot less prominent, and the latter one is still there but funny instead of immersion breaking. There is one major control issue in the remake which is pretty bad. In Dead Space 2 you could pick from classic aiming and normal aiming. The latter has crosshairs in the middle of your screen which you aim at, and classic aiming traces rays from your gun that you actually have to line up. Classic Dead Space 1 uses the latter option exclusively, and in the remake it's some unholy combination of the two. I don't know for sure because it was very weird to test, but it seems like it's both systems at once. Where your bullets are actually aimed seems to be using classic aiming rules, but the crosshair is always in the middle of your screen. It tripped me up a lot while I was playing, and I have no idea why it's like this. There are so many new options to pick from in the settings menu, and the absence of an aiming option when it was literally in 2 is so weird. Corpses in Dead Space have always been this weird source of comedy that I'm not really sure if it was intentional or not. The game takes itself super seriously, and quick spoiler warning for Dead Space 3, no more spoilers after Isaac stops whipping the nene. The series literally ends with all of humanity being eaten and consumed by moons made of human beings. Literally everyone dies. It's not a happy story, and there's barely any comedy to go around. So, Basically, I'm not sure if corpses are supposed to do that. It's very jarring to have this deep talk on the phone about what could have happened to the station when in the background you can see Isaac stomp a woman so hard all of her limbs fall off like she's made of Kinects. Or how all fights end with Isaac giddily running around to the corpses of the horrific monsters and screaming while smashing them like a piñata. Speaking of Isaac screaming, there was another reason a remake was in order, and I'm very, very happy that they decided to capitalize on this. The protagonist, Isaac Clarke, was entirely silent in the original, but became voiced in Dead Space 2 and 3. They took the opportunity that the remake granted them to give him full VO by the original actor throughout the entire game.
Do you really need me to tell you this is a bad idea?
Well, I'm all out of good ideas, so guess what's left?
Isaac was already a very well-established protagonist just from 2 and 3, and the new VO is really, really well done. Isaac is a systems engineer, and he feels like it. When shit goes wrong, he's the one to actually suggest solutions and execute plans to jury-rig the falling apart Ishimura. The voice work was not half-assed at all. A bunch of stuff has been rewritten. Isaac doesn't feel like he's the other character's imaginary friend who they never acknowledge. He's a proper character in his own right with a say in what's going on with a lot of authority.
There's gotta be something. The asteroid. The one in the mining bay for smelting.
What about it?
If I attach the SOS beacon to that asteroid and then launch it away from the ship, we'd get a clean broadcast.
And you'd get yourself killed. The machinery in there is still running, Isaac.
Then it probably kept those things out too. This is our best shot, Kendra. I'm taking it.
He's clearly scared, as he should be given the circumstances, but is level-headed enough to try to do all he can to survive.
I don't know. If I don't focus, we'll run out of air before it matters.
They also gave him some proper sass, which is excellent.
Mr. Clarke? Hello? I must speak with you.
Who is this?
Dr. Terrence Kine, the Ishimura's chief science officer. I studied them for the church.
I'm done talking to unitologists.
But the planet won't rest until the is returned. You can't leave.
Watch me.
Isaac Clarke is an excellent protagonist precisely because he's not some genetically engineered Master Chief, Marcus Phoenix, or the Factorio engineer. Isaac is instead just like some guy. He doesn't have access to any incredible superpower, he's just a working man who has to go above and beyond to save himself. He doesn't have access to, like, guns, mostly. He uses industrial mining equipment to slay horrific monsters from beyond space and time. That last point is actually very eloquent because it explains why ammo for them is all around the ship while simultaneously showcasing Isaac's proficiency and expertise. I really do like how those weapons and their upgrades are implemented. Their design is all from classic Dead Space 1, so I'm complimenting design from over 10 years ago, but regardless. You upgrade your equipment through power nodes, which are relatively rare, and spend them at the upgrade benches, which are few and far between. Every weapon has many capacity upgrades, and they refill the magazine completely for free when purchased. This hereby incentivizes you to walk around the Ishimura with every gun at the lowest mag size possible in case you stumble across a bench, and you have to balance your own greed with your need to not get turned into paste. It's also very unclear when you'll get access to the very expensive armor upgrades, which on one hand makes you save up and not spend a lot of money on ammo and meds to trivialize the experience, but on the other hand, I looked up where all the rig schematics were to know if there even were any left when I was unknowingly in the final room of the game, and then realized I was floating 60 grand for no reason. I'm going to be talking about spoilers now, so if you care, I'll wrap up by saying that Dead Space is a really good game with an okay plot and a really cool setting. I think it's probably the best horror game I've ever played. I did have pretty much the entire game spoiled to me before playing it, and for me that actually made the plot more enjoyable, so do with that information what you will. Isaac has a girlfriend called Nicole who was on the Ishimura when, well, things happened on board, and one of Isaac's main goals is to find her. You do, and she's alive and well, but, well, there's a couple red flags about her. Maybe it has something to do with how she ends everything she says with,
"You can make us whole again."
Or how she seems entirely emotionally detached and never brings up anything that's happening. Or that she's obsessed with the mind-altering Metal Gear plot device that's responsible for systematically killing everyone that you've seen. But, you know, something doesn't seem quite right about her. She's pretty clearly been dead from the start, but Isaac doesn't catch on. I'm honestly not sure why she's in the game at all. Anything involving her is super weak because it's really hard to give a fuck about a character who is dead on arrival with no characterization. It's revealed towards the end of the game that she's actually been a different character the entire time, a woman named Cross. She's a character you talk to maybe 3 times alongside a handful of audio logs about her boyfriend. If Cross didn't disappear after the hydroponics section and generally had a more repeated presence before she became Nicole, this probably would have been a lot more impactful. The remake giving Isaac VO helps me empathize with him, but when he's trying to connect with a cardboard cutout of his girlfriend, it's really hard not to see him as adult even if it makes sense in universe. universe. It's a little bit better than it used to be, but I'm afraid a band-aid isn't gonna fix this wound. As for, you know, unitology, the marker, the necromorphs, the whole driving force of the plot, yeah, it's alright. It gets a lot more interesting when it's actually explained in 2 and 3, but as it stands in this game on its own, the marker is just kind of a wibbly-wobbly magic plot device that makes people go insane and somehow makes these for some reason. The conclusion of the series is very satisfying though, I swear. Oh yeah, the final boss, the Hive Mind. Yeah, it fucking sucks. This is how you beat the boss. Walking back and forth is super engaging stuff. The cutscene before the boss must be rewatched every single attempt and cannot be skipped, which is a cardinal fucking sin. Overall though, I think it is really important for me to stress that I absolutely loved the game. Turning off the music and experiencing pure dread as I walked through the Ishimura for 10 hours was memorable enough that I would recommend it to anyone who likes this kind of thing, and I don't even like horror. I totally meant to make that joke!